One does not simply talk about the First World War without talking about perhaps one of its most famous veterans. John Ronald Reuel Tolkien served during 1916, and it is believed by many that his beloved works of high fantasy, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, received at least partial inspiration from what he saw during the Battle of the Somme. Without further ado, let's just see how much the war to end all wars built the land and lore of Middle-earth. J.R.R. Tolkien was born in 1892 in the Orange Free State, which is now a part of modern-day South Africa, to English parents who had immigrated there for Tolkien's father's banking work. He moved to England soon afterwards and excelled at language. When his cousins made up a language for their games, Tolkien, already studying Latin and Anglo-Saxon, started constructing languages of his own. Tolkien's fascination with a priori languages, as they are called, continued throughout his early life, and by the time the First World War had broken out, he had already been creating two languages partially derived from Finnish, Greek, and Welsh that would go on to serve as the languages of his elvish creations in The Lord of the Rings. It seems ironic that the ethereal-sounding creations of Tolkien were devised during a period of brutal and explosive warfare. Furthermore, Tolkien stated that the languages were not made around his stories, rather the other way around. His prowess of Old English also served as the basis of Rohirric and for the people of Rohan. When the war started, he delayed enlistment until completing his Oxford studies. That's right, be cool, stay in school. Tolkien served with the Lancashire Fusiliers in the Somme, facing off against the Imperial German Army. The year 1916 is often considered to be one of the most brutal years of the war, with the battles of Verdun and the Somme happening simultaneously along the Western Front. The horror, anguish, and pain and fatigue Tolkien must have felt in the trenches, along with the artillery bombardment that resulted in the loss of his friends, must have led to this line from the Lord of the Rings books. And here things still grew, harsh, twisted, bitter, struggling for life. In the glens of the Morgai on the other side of the valley, low scrubby trees lurked and clung. Coarse grey grass tussocks fought with the stones, and withered mosses crawled on them, and everywhere great, writhing, tangled brambles spawned. It may have even inspired this iconic scene from the film adaptations.
It is a barren wasteland, riddled with fire and ash and dust. The very air you breathe is a poisonous fume.
Although Tolkien often stated that the war had no bearing on his stories, he did say that the dead marches, quote, owe a debt to the fields of northern France after the Somme. Some would think that this is a reference to the extremely desolate and charred landscape of the battlefields of the Somme and World War I as a whole. And of course, the various battles of Middle-earth are massive in scope, much like the battles of the Somme and Verdun. Tolkien's service in the war must have given him time to think of the concepts of mortality, anguish, despair, and doom, all of which are themes that feature throughout his work. Even though The Lord of the Rings is not a direct reflection of the war to end all wars, and the Battle of the Somme did not have a clear winner, Tolkien and his allies strove to do what the Fellowship of the Ring did, making sure that those who would unleash despair would not pass.